What's driving national growth in all industries from one of the country's most dynamic regions?
Welcome to Strategic Compass, our new podcast exploring the strategic forces shaping the future of business. I'm Patrick Ryan, KPMG's National Managing Partner, Advisory Strategy and Markets.
And I'm Kathy Hollinger, CEO of the Greater Washington Partnership. We are thrilled to sit down with the region's most influential leaders to hear their stories of bold ideas, collaboration, and leadership shaping the economy from Baltimore through Washington, D.C., all the way to Richmond and nationally.
And as we dive into these conversations, we'll uncover how Greater Washington area CEOs are driving national conversations. Today, we have a special conversation featuring three leaders who have shaped the trajectory of the Greater Washington region. Ted Leonsis, Chairman and CEO of Monumental Sports and Entertainment, Peter Scher, Vice Chair of JPMorganChase, and Russ Ramsey, Chairman and CEO of Ramsey Asset Management. These leaders are not just titans in their respective fields. They are three of the founders of the Greater Washington Partnership. The partnership unites influential business leaders to address regional challenges and drive economic competitiveness across the region, from Baltimore through Washington, D.C., all the way to Richmond. 10 years ago, these leaders came together around a shared purpose to connect the region's incredible assets and mines to unlock its full potential for growth and prosperity. As a board member myself, this is a mission I care about deeply. And today, that mission is more urgent than ever. We're in a pivotal moment with an opportunity to define the region's next chapter. And now, I look forward to hearing from Kathy as she guides us through the story of how it all began, and more importantly, where we go from here.
Welcome to Strategic Compass, a podcast about bold leadership and big bets. I'm Kathy Hollinger, CEO of the Greater Washington Partnership. This season, we've spoken with leaders making long-term investments in people, places, and performance. And today, I'm talking with three leaders who did not just talk about regional growth, they helped build the platform to drive it. I am joined by Peter Scher, Vice Chair of JPMorganChase, Ted Leonsis, Chairman and CEO of Monumental Sports and Entertainment, and Russ Ramsey, Chairman and CEO of Ramsey Asset Management, who came together to create the Greater Washington Partnership around a simple but ambitious premise that this region can compete and win by acting as one across jurisdictional lines. Nearly a decade later, that vision is being tested and realized in new ways, and the choices leaders make now will help define the region's next decade. So, welcome, gentlemen. Let's start at the beginning. Three highly accomplished entrepreneurial leaders, each operating at scale in very different arenas, came together around an idea that this region could operate differently and compete differently. And it is worth grounding this in the facts that the region has extraordinary assets, highly educated workforce, world-class universities, global companies, and proximity to decision-making unlike anywhere else in the country. But at that time, those strengths weren't translating into coordinated action. And before there was an organization, there was a moment, one moment, that was the Olympic bid. So take us back there, Russ, Ted, Peter, who called who? Who was the spark, and why did you say yes? Russ, I'm going to start with you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. It's indeed a pleasure to be here today, and always love talking about one of our favorite topics, which is how to make this the greatest region in the country to build a business, bring a family, live a life, retire. And equally as compelling is to be with my two great friends, Peter Scher and Ted Leonsis. So I think probably from my point of view, to best understand how the Greater Washington Partnership came about, probably starts a little bit with the Olympic journey, and then I think goes to really Peter's idea and vision of what was viewed as a failed attempt to bring the Olympics, and we are still now the only international capital city in the world that's never hosted an Olympic Games. But maybe I'll ask Ted, who really was the one that initially roped me into rolling up my sleeves and driving that sort of day to day. But it was really Ted's vision of Washington as a super city, super region. I'll call it a misunderstood asset. And I think we did accomplish that. But Ted, you want to add more perspective?
I went to the Olympics, went to London, tried to understand everything that was happening there and how they transformed from sleepy little London town to the greatest city on the planet. And I fell in love with the idea of sports as an organizing principle and bringing in technology and politicians and the like. And I said, we should bid for the games. And they said, great, Tag, you're it. You should be chairman. I said, no way. I have a couple of other jobs, but I know just the man to call. I called Russ. Russ said, no way. I'm a pretty good salesman. I kept at it. And the idea was as advertised. It's let's go win the Olympic Games and let's have all eyes of the world on our community. And let's understand that the only way we'll be able to compete and win against other jurisdictions can't be just Washington. We have to embrace Virginia. We have to embrace all the way to Delaware, if you will. And so we brought that together. We were able to bring in governors, senators, the whole bureaucracy, the leading banks, financial institutions, the tech companies. Everyone got psyched, and it was great. And we didn't win.
But just to put it in a little perspective,
Yeah.
Which I think is probably helpful just to kind of understand the investment that went to even thinking about the Greater Washington Partnership is, the Olympics, even today is one of the most unique and special events that exist in the world. And notwithstanding the tremendous growth of other of sports and events, others, every 2 years, whether it's the summer or winter, when it comes around, the world stands still. And it's truly one of the, still great events where, people will put their arms down, they'll come together, they'll compete. And so we had that same sort of rosy feeling when the first thing started. And as any good organization, the International Olympic Committee runs one of the most difficult beauty contests there exists. They say, you're one of 75, now you're one of 10, and okay, now you're one of 8. And by the way, if you really want to be considered, you need to raise $10 million. You need to put together a firm bid encompassing every aspect as if you were awarded the games tomorrow, you are mobilized, ready to go, security in place, all the investments, all the buildings, everything ready to go as if it was Olympic standard, which we did. And it was an amazing process. We put together a team. We had enormous resources. Now Monica Dixon, who runs community for TED, was kind of the COO, and we assembled an amazing board and raised the money, made the investments. And then it all comes down to one day, which I'll never forget, because it was January 2015. And I was actually at my father-in-law's funeral at Arlington Cemetery, which was a very cold day, but a great moment. Our country does a lot of things well. I think it's not well, but Arlington and honoring our vets is one of the great things. And he was an amazing, special guy, Distinguished Flying Cross hero. He was on the Ed Sullivan Show for rescue. He actually did way back when. But we get the call, you're out, Boston is in. And as Ted says, we're done. And we assumed that that was it. And so just to take that a little bit farther on, we had a little gathering, said goodbye to everybody, closed everything up, and assumed that we were done and moved on. And I will say, though, that back to the kind of striking a chord, unusually, the broader media, including the Washington Post, Jonathan O'Connor wrote this long piece that, well, what now? You can't stop. And because we had really brought the region together in a way for people to think about it. And I still will say it will be at one point in maybe not my lifetime, the most beautiful games ever, just the way that it was all brought together and one of the most successful. And that led to the phone call that I got from Peter about his idea for the Greater Washington Partnership.
And, Russ, I actually remember with all three of you, When we first had conversations, we talked a lot about, it was never the intention to stand up another organization. It was the idea to really create a table that did not exist, which really through the Olympic bid process did that. Peter, JPMorgan invests heavily in regions across the country. You have been at the lead of so much of that. But when you looked at our region at that time, kind of insert Peter Scher now, what is it that you saw as the biggest unrealized opportunity for us in the region?
So I'll take one step back before that. So going back probably to 2011 or 12, we started an initiative at JPMorgan called Global Cities, which was essentially, and Ted was, I remember during this, I was reading, Ted would write a lot about mega cities and looking at around the world that the cities that actually thought of themselves as regions and brought in all the assets were the ones who were going to succeed. And the global economy was becoming increasingly competitive. And even back then, it's even more so now, it becomes easier and easier to move capital and to move labor to places that are best suited. And so what we started looking at is what are the characteristics of the regions that are competing well, and what are the characteristics of the regions that are not competing well. And one of the things we looked at globally was that the regions that actually thought of themselves as regions and worked together as a region were far and away competing the best in the economy. And so we started looking at that. Right around the time, end of 2014, 2015, I became chairman of the region for JPMorgan. And so I said, well, let's look at how this fits into this region. And there were two things I saw. When we convened people in the region, you know, you'd have Montgomery County coming and complaining that Arlington County is trying to steal jobs. And I think the term Russ used at one point, it's just, they were pushing air in a balloon. It didn't matter. And this is what people were kind of fixated on. But I also, at the same time, I saw what these guys had been doing with the Olympics. And to me, you know, I've lived in this region for 40 plus years. It was the first time I saw the region come together, recognizing that the only way to compete is to actually bring all these assets together. And so it was a little after, it was sometime in 2015. My first call was to Russ. I said, listen, at the time, I didn't even think of like, is it a Greater Washington Partnership? But you guys have demonstrated the ability to actually coalesce leaders in this region around something. Is there a longer term play? And the three of us started having discussions, and we said, look, we all have busy jobs and there's plenty to do. And if there's not a critical mass of particularly business leaders, because I think there's often too much reliance on government leaders who are there for 4 years or 8 years. And Ted, you know, you have to make decisions for 10, 15, 20 years, and you can't just be relying on political leaders who are thinking in 4-year increments. And one of the things we saw in a lot of regions is that the business leaders who are making long-term investments, the right people around the table. And we said, well, could we get the right people around the table in this region? And as we thought about it from Baltimore to Richmond, and we said, let's give ourselves a year to see if we could develop a critical mass. And we started having meetings. Russ and I would be driving up and down. I think we started in Baltimore with Kevin Plank, and then we went down to Richmond. And there was people were collaborating. We hosted we had, speaking of London, we had Tony Blair come for dinner talking about how he used the London Olympics to actually spur economic development.
Rebranded it Great Britain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what we started, we said, let's give ourselves, and really, I think after like 4 or 5 months of these conversations, like there may be something here. Because what we said to people, look, we don't know if this is going to work. And if it doesn't work, you know what? We all have day jobs, but we wanted business leaders to say, we're going to make a time and financial commitment of at least 3 years. We need 3 years to see if this can work. And do we have enough? And I think by the summer of 15, we thought, you know what? There may be something here. And we actually came and met in this building, in Ted's office, to say we thought we had something that we could put together here.
Yep. Lots of risk there, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. And what I found amazing is that this community sometimes divides people. And Russ had come up with this great logo, and we put the unity in the community. When one wins, we all win. And that overarching notion really was very compelling for all of the people because they felt that our intentions was, let's take the assets, the 8 or 10 great local universities. One of the first things we did was we held the meeting at JPMorgan and brought all the university presidents together, and they had never done that before.
They never sat down. They never sat down and talked to each other. Yes.
And it was, yes, you're competing, but you're not. And if we could position our great universities as a major asset for the community, make us more competitive.
Particularly international. I remember the conversation. Listen, let's figure out what we can do together to increase the broader pipeline of young people who want to come to Washington to study. And if we can increase the broader pipeline, everyone's going to get a piece of that action.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the university example is a very good one about how getting the right people in a room and having an open mind, can lead to possibilities. And so in that meeting, I can remember like yesterday, thanks to everyone, we've gotten these university presidents who, busy schedules, we got 10 of the 12 we wanted together there. And I kind of started the meeting by saying, it's great to have you here. We don't, really have an agenda. And before I got that out of my mind, Wes Bush, who was then chairman and CEO of Northrop Grumman, said, well, I have an agenda. And people who know Wes know that he is, not exactly a, outgoing, sort of aggressive on the surface person. And he goes, I became a part of this partnership, and I brought actually our company here to Washington, D.C. so many years ago, relocated here because we're a company of 75,000 people and 25,000 in the region. And we very much believe in the mission of higher education and the 4-year degree. And he looked around at all the university presidents and he goes, and I rely on all of you to produce the talent that I need, and none of you are keeping up. A little silence in the room.
Yeah.
And he then said, and what I mean is that if you look, and this was 2017, 2018, the number one challenge globally for all these companies was lack of digital skills.
Yeah.
And being behind in digital skills and not getting them in the region. And so for the next 2 hours, all the presidents literally put their guards down. They openly agreed with him. And that led to the formation of the Capital Co-Lab. And thanks to JPMorgan and some of the programs that they brought to bear with that, it's been an enormous, I think, success in not only employer signaling and even going down to K through 12, what's needed in terms of skills, how the universities need to change their curriculum in order to stay up, and then a way where in terms of trying to retain talent, which we'll talk about later, these universities all have different missions and objectives, but they want to retain talent and keep them closer to where they started.
And one of the amazing things I remember when that first year we were doing meetings, and I didn't think, this was one of the surprises to me, every single CEO we talked to in the region, we were down in Richmond at Dominion with
Tom,
who's an amazing regional leader.
Yes.
And he was talking about workforce in the energy sector. And we were in Baltimore with Kevin Plank, and he was talking about workforce. And it was a recurring theme. I mean, and this is now the fundamental business issue of the day now. How do we actually create the pipeline of talent in these various industries we need? And how do we get the right people around the table to have the conversation?
The other interesting thing was we met with Kevin. I remember his thinking, we want Washington to be great. We want Baltimore to be great. When I recruit people, I say, you can live in Washington, you can live in Baltimore. Here's the high-speed train that we want to bring here. And that selling the region is no different than the other great areas where your business could be in Manhattan, you could have a branch office right across the river in New Jersey, and you could live in Connecticut. And that all, where do you live? Where do you work? I live in New York.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we're seeing that happen so that the size and scale of regionalism, and as Peter mentioned, it's only going to be 4 super regions in North America, 10 around the world. To be in that top 10 position, you have scale, you get advantage. You have a great port, which we have in Baltimore. You have 3 international world-class airports. You have 10 research-based institutions of higher learning. You have green space. You have iconic real estate. I mean, you can easily identify, and that's what London did. What is our advantage? And London at the time was looked at as a small metro area. And through transportation infrastructure investments, it's now about 300 miles long.
Yeah.
Okay. People live in the greater London area. That's what we think we're going to do here. It's going to take another 10 or 15 years to get to that conclusion, but we have to securitize that we're going to be one of the top 10 regions on the planet.
And, Russ really gets credit. You should talk about this. But, one of the things, there's, sometimes things you choose timing and sometimes timing chooses you. But the Amazon HQ2 was a very early test for us and the region. And while New York had a civil war, which ultimately kept Amazon out, you really led the charge, Russ, in terms of how we brought, because you got DC, Maryland, and Virginia who were all competing.
Well, it's where muscle memory can come into play. And I think we all should appropriately take credit for leaning in. But we all recall, Amazon announced the big fanfare. We're going to have a second headquarters. We're taking bids unsolicited. There's no regular criteria, but this is kind of what we need. We need to be able to house at least 100,000 employees. We need this, we need that. And it led one of the great sweepstakes that probably has ever happened. I think at the final count, there was like 258 regions that actually thought that they could attract Amazon to actually be part of, actually build their second headquarters and be part of it. But it immediately brought back the memory from the Olympic bid, where we understood that, and we didn't control anything. But when we understood that there would be bids from each one of the different regions. And I think there ended up being 12 from Maryland, DC, and Virginia in total. And so our team went to each of them and basically said, listen, I know each of you think you have going to have the best bid, but the reality is, unless you think of yourself as a region, and that's really where this kind of with one wins, we all win sort of emerged. Look at this data. Look at what each of you are individually. You're subscale, you're not competitive, but if you look at the region as a region, from Baltimore to Richmond, we're the third biggest economy in the U.S., seventh biggest in the world. We have 3 world-class airports. We have amazing universities. And what Amazon really wants to know is, are we going to be accepted politically? Can we attract the talent and retain the talent? Can we create the talent with their universities? And is there going to be, a place where, we can leverage and take advantage of all of that? And so, Kathy, you have your own story that you should share, which I just heard last week. But the reality was, we went to all 3 of the important leaders, the governor and the mayor, and we said, listen, I know you all want to compete, but you've got to sign this letter, this 2-page letter to Jeff Bezos, showing all the strengths and benefits of the region. And you got to commit in writing that whoever wins, you will throw your support behind him.
You brought back, if one wins, we all win. If one wins, we all win.
Exactly. And what did Jeff tell you when you saw it?
As Amazon was recognizing, a milestone moment, and they had a board of directors meeting, and Jeff was there, and I made my way to him and told him that I was with the Greater Washington Partnership, and he said, "Thank you so much. Your organization was instrumental. Look at where we are. Look at what is around us, and look at how we've grown." And he called out each of you. And I used it as an opportunity to invite him to come and thank you himself.
But in fairness, I think we need to give a shout out to Matt Kelly and the JBG team. Because as the process emerged and they sort of did the down, and we all thought they were going to do like a downscale from like 12 to like 4, and they never did.
Yeah.
But it became pretty clear that Matt and team had formulated by far the best bid.
Yeah.
And, we sort of love all 12 of the bidders, but it became clear that if they were going to pick this region, it was going to be National Landing, which was then known as Crystal City. And so I think it's really important and without the governor, without Virginia Tech, without the investment in building the Innovation Center at Crystal City, all the things that were important to Amazon. So it was absolutely a team environment, a team bid, but I mean, sometimes the best things that get done.
A full circle moment for him and for them. If I could just pull on, because I think it's important to note the seeds that were planted and what is happening now. When you think of CoLab and what was established, and you think about regions coming together and what's happening.
Transportation, let's talk.
Transportation and WMATA. what we hear from regions around the country, we hear it very regularly. What did you do? How did you do it?
Right.
What can we do?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, but I think one of the interesting things, one of the ways that we sort of flip the script a little bit here is listen, it's sort of, you think about sales. Regions are used to basically going and making pitch. Let me tell you who we are. And they never say, let me understand what you need. And when you have business leaders who are making decisions about where to invest, it's the regions who and having business people, CEOs sitting around this table saying, let's understand what are the things that a Jeff Bezos needs to make a decision. He needs some certainty. He doesn't want to put himself in the middle of some political civil war. He wants to feel welcome. Listen, Jamie Dimon, had his shareholder letter this week, said, we've reduced, JPMorgan's reduced we now have 10,000 less employees in New York and 10,000 more employees in Texas. And that trend will likely continue because New York, in fact, the Washington Post had an editorial about this yesterday. The signal from New York is like, we're not, you come or go, we don't really care. And companies like, listen, we want to be where you feel like you're welcome and you're part of it. And it may sound trite, but I think listen, you've gone through this more than anyone else.
Yes. And I think by having this blend of business leaders, academia, philanthropy leaders, banking leaders, and politicians, we can hold the mirror up to what those constituencies are feeling and thinking, right? We do our polling and might say that, using me as an example, I live in Maryland. I drive through Maryland, through Virginia, into DC every single day. So traffic, infrastructure, parking, these are all things that are important. And I remember one of the first things we had to get involved with was that Metro was really broken. Yep. And Metro is 3 regions. It's Virginia and DC and Maryland. And they each had different priorities. And so I remember at the time it was, we'll all work on the mayor because she's got to figure some things out. Russ, you get the governor in Virginia. Ted, you get the governor in Maryland. And we called and cajoled and said, we need to act in unison to get this fixed. And then we can claw in federal dollars. But they're not going to be supportive unless they see that the regional leaders all do it. And we were both told, well, I'll do it, but I don't want to be left at the altar. So it was literally like one of those movie scenes where, there was the handoff all at the same time. But that saved Metro. And now Metro, 10 years later, is really thriving. And they look back at that one act to get the federal dollars and the local auspices aligned as really a way to get that driven.
I was saying when you said Warren Buffett said a couple of years ago, as he was talking about, American bases, he said something like that the federal government is the silent partner. I think today you'd say federal government is not so silent partner. And this is where you think about shame on us. You've got companies who, whether they want to or not, need to be more connected to this region. Listen, just think about the defense sector and how much more defense spending is going to go on over the next 10 years. Yeah. They need to be in, spitting distance of the Pentagon and policymakers. So they have a business reason to be here. And if we don't make it easier for them to make a decision to actually locate, headquarters. I mean, Boeing moved its headquarters here. It wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't because it's a beautiful view. Right. They want to be here. And so for us, we're being handed this opportunity to say, make it easier for us as a business.
And now we have new competitors overnight. Florida is a major competitor. Absolutely. Miami is now emerging as a tech center. Dallas, you mentioned for JPMorgan. Both those states, Texas and Florida, are really aggressively going after companies in New York to move there. And we have to be in that fight. We have to be telling companies, bring your headquarters here, set up a second headquarters here. And that's how there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers in that region.
Well, Kathy, this is the conversation we all had just a few weeks ago with Governor Moore in Maryland. That right now Maryland is perceived, and I think the governor is trying very hard to fight against this, is perceived as a state that's very difficult for businesses to do business. And that's not a good place for Maryland to be, particularly as the federal workforce is being reworked. And I think he recognizes he's got to begin to change the narrative for Maryland.
And even a couple weeks later, we had both of the governors and the mayor, and I think there was a willingness and recognition that they have to be more aligned, period, more coordinated, at least around a few things, but also that they know that private sector has choices and that they're making decisions that don't necessarily mean that it's growth in this region and that it is happening elsewhere. And there are very basic reasons why they're happening elsewhere. They are more organized. They are more coordinated. They are more business friendly. So a lot of conversations that really speak to where we are in this moment. I would say, Ted, I would love to just be able to, you've been making some pretty visible long-term investments and bets on what you know downtown DC should be. And maybe just to talk a little bit about what a successful downtown looks like, knowing you're at the helm of a lot of that right now.
You know, Washington, D.C., and I remember Jim Kimsey, God rest his soul, he always used to say to me that Washington, D.C. should be the city on the hill, the greatest city on the planet, where the nation's capital should be the most important city in the world. And with this odd amalgam where 50 miles of contributed real estate from Virginia and Maryland, and there's no city planning that's going on. And what it needs is a collective vision and then a permanence of what that vision should be. And so, you know, I think that we have to have a growth mindset. We have to have an innovation mindset. We have to be the absolute center of how we can grow and create a much more compelling double bottom line society, whereas the country does better and companies do better and individuals do better, that we can take care of our own and we can take care of the people that perhaps are a step back and help lift them up to be the greatest country. And what we want to be, what, you know, I would like us to be, is a sense of permanence, because presidents come and go, governors come and go, mayors come and go, CEOs come and go. But if we can be kind of the collective association that has all of the knowledge, all of the history, we know what the North Star is for our growth, I think we can be good shepherds, and we also can remain the people to see. You know, when a new governor gets elected, they come to see us because they know we have this collective insight and power and connections for them. And that's a really, really important reason for us to be. And it's why, Kathy, you're running the #1 fastest growing, largest nonprofit. I mean, it's only 10 years old. There's a lot of groups that are a lot older, but our higher calling of being very embracing of the whole region, I think, has resonated with the political and the academic and the business community.
You know, in some ways, I think you could argue that the case for a Greater Washington Partnership is exponentially greater now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It says it, with politics being both transient and dysfunctional, with the changes in the workforce that AI and tech, you guys talk about this more than I do, but that we're at an inflection point and I think too often people underestimate the assets that we have in this region. I've done a lot of work in Detroit. Mayor Duggan was here, and actually your friend, Ted's friend, Dan Gilbert. Duggan has said to me, if I had the assets in Detroit that you guys have here, I mean, his closest university, research university, is an hour away in Ann Arbor. I mean, that's not a region. And so I think we tend to underestimate the assets we have and get a little caught up in thinking, well, politics is functional. politics functional is frankly an advantage for us now, because you need the stability of this business leadership that's in it for the long run, that's making decisions and investments for the long run that can actually help steer through a period like this.
And we have to, as a country, people around the world look at Washington, D.C., regardless of who was in. When we were bidding for the Olympics, it was the Obama White House. And we had a really, really muddled picture, if you will. Now we have a Trump White House, and it's, same thing, just kind of a different tonality and bag. But our job is to, when we export that Washington, D.C. and Greater Washington is a great place, where that's the most important IP, most important positioning that we can do for America. Because you travel anywhere and CNN is on. If they're broadcasting something positive about America, it's great. But mostly the news has been bad, and there's so much noise. I view a part of our job is how do we communicate the good, positive signal of our region and the 10 million people that are here on a worldwide basis.
But Kathy, I think it's an important moment now that we're looking at the 10-year anniversary of the organization in October to kind of go back and just reaffirm the why now. And I mean, we didn't have an office, we didn't have a deck, we didn't have a name, we didn't have a logo. So it was a classic startup, and it was a classic 12-month or so period of, go, no go. But going back to those foundational days, as Peter mentioned earlier, we eventually got to the CEOs because we said, listen, very, very simple. We don't know if this is going to work or not, but we know that most successful regions have a CEO-led organization that's kind of the voice of business. But as we looked at Maryland, DC, and Virginia, there wasn't one in either one of those.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, let's just really look at this as we should, which is a sum of the parts. Like, with all due respect, each of you are kind of subscale and have real limitations, but there are things you have to work together that are part of the challenges. Transportation, infrastructure, housing, basics that are here to stay, are never going to change. And so as we look today to a little bit what Peter just said, I think it's probably even more important today, because 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, what did we accomplish? And so, for example, with transportation infrastructure, very skeptical 10 years ago and very skeptical even now. And the only thing we could say to people 10 years ago was, listen, I don't know if any of our efforts are going to work or not work, but I can tell you there's never been a plan. And so you can look at that first blueprint that went out, which was the 25-point regional blueprint on what is going to connect and allow us to have a world-class, efficient, and building infrastructure. Now, things have gotten in the way, COVID, workplace, how work, et cetera. But we've made a real difference. We have real metrics that have shown investment, ridership, transportation efficiency.
Yeah.
And we have to mark ourselves every day.
Yeah.
And we have to do that, today with talent, with K through 12 skills, with infrastructure needed for the future, for growth. I mean, right now we're falling behind in growth.
Yeah.
Because we aren't viewed as an innovative, area other than data centers that is attracting the businesses which are changing things. We need to work better at that.
Yeah.
DC is down from closing in on 800,000 people to 650,000 people in 10 years.
Ridiculous.
That's not a good indicator of growth. We go back to the first principles. When I went to London, I said, I've never been through the Channel. And I remember driving with someone who knew a lot about it. And he said, the French and the British, they got together and said,
they hate each other and everything else. Transportation.
Right. And there was no innovation where the guy in France said, I want to make the tunnel this narrow and curved. They made it meet. It's 10 years later. And what do we talk about in terms of traffic? Why the bridge in Maryland doesn't connect with the big infrastructure investment that was made in Virginia. Now, because we're historians, we're able to say to Westmore, we were there. We predicted this would happen. All this infrastructure dollars was spent in Virginia, and it's made the traffic worse, right? Because now you've got, and who's going to get blamed for that? Maryland.
Yeah.
And so we want to be kind of a strong voice with great perspective. And, it's tough for a politician to sometimes listen to us because you throw out the notion we should tax businesses higher. And 70% of the populace, the voters say yes. Because we think those extra dollars would come to programs that would benefit us. And then at the same time, the business people would say, well, if you do that, we'll go to a lower tax state. And that's happening every day in California. We have to be a reasonable voice to say, if you want growth, you're going to have balance from the business, the political, the city side of things.
Well, and you need this is where you need, and I think this is where the important role of partnership. We've been having this conversation in New York because they've been very cavalier about, wanting large taxpayers and not recognizing. And so this is what I think the Post piece yesterday, it's not an emotional thing. It's not, okay, you're not being nice to us. This is math. And, and literally our people called New York City Hall and said, listen, if the mayor wants to sit down and we'll explain to him just how we make these decisions, but when there's just not much of an interest in that, then you're not in a position. I wanted to add one other thing. You may decide, your editors may cut this out. It's not, but I think one of the things you said, people ask like, what makes this work? And I think one of the early decisions, and I think as we go forward, is to ensure that GWP is not the place that you come to deal with sort of the day-to-day drama of what's going on or some individual.
And we're not lobbyists.
No, and so we've said, this is the place that people come to talk about long-term issues affecting our region. So basically check your parochial interests at the door.
Yeah.
And I think maintaining that discipline, which you've done, Kathy, an incredible job doing that, it's hard because, you're in a moment and companies come, oh my God, I got this big issue. And no, we have to stay. If you're going to keep the kind of CEO level interest in this thing, it's what are the long-term policy decisions? What are the long-term investments we have to make in a region to really make this?
And look at what we've worked on: transportation, equitable growth, the planning around aligning the educational infrastructure with where the jobs are. We've been very, very pragmatic, but to move those things, it doesn't happen in a quarter or a year or 4 years. It's going to take another decade, right? And so, what we're very, very focused on is how do we keep this going, because this arc will move, but it's going to take 10, 20 years to really show progress.
And that elevated thinking from a leader and thinking more collectively versus individually, that is rare. We are fortunate that we have a table that thinks that way. But when you move around the country and you move throughout the business ecosystem, it is harder to do. And I would say that where we are in this region, economically, it's hard to do because you're thinking about the bottom line, as private sector is. But I will tell you that is 100% when we are talking to other businesses or organizations to come and be a part of this table, that is what they appreciate. I am at a table with my peers, thinking in partnership versus in an isolated fashion, and that has been done very well.
And I think the fact is, we spend a lot of time thinking about who are the right partners you want to have around the table. It's not just, okay, go out and get anyone who could join, but who are the people, different sectors, who can be additive to the conversations.
Yeah.
Peter talked about what's happening in New York, and obviously there's this movement, left, right, and most people live in that vast middle. They exist in that vast middle. And we worked really, really hard on Metro and safety and security around that.
Yeah.
The federal government, as we know and how it's presented, the National Guard is around. And yesterday we saw that in New York, the dream of free buses, it's unfundable, not going to happen. We saw yesterday a report locally that Ward 8 has never been safer, that the crime rates are lowest in Ward 8. That, to me, says a lot, right? That we wanted to uplift all of the communities. And we were the first group to build a practice facility for the Wizards, have an arena for the Mystics. It's 10 years old.
Yeah.
And no one followed us. And everyone complained about, well, it's not going to be safe. You got to take the metro out there. We said, okay, well, let's connect those dots. Let's make metro work safe, clean. Let's make sure that people understand that they can come out and go to a game. They can start a business out there. They can buy one of the condos that the city has been developing there with developers. And that's as equally as important part of our city and community as downtown. And so I think you've got like case studies there that you have to take a integrated, connect the dots view of how we develop the city and the community and the real estate, as well as all the public transportation. And the cities that don't, they're going to have the payment will be due. And you saw that, a big promise.
Yeah.
Free bus rides for everybody, not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Chicago right now. Chicago's having huge challenges because it's the same type of thing. And listen, we have a big presence in Chicago. Our employees don't feel safe. I mean, employees don't feel like, and so, listen, we're doing the right thing, but it's also the right business decision because we have to build a community in which employees feel safe moving around the community on public transportation. And there are plenty of stories of cities and regions that don't think that that's important and they suffer the consequences of that.
But we heard it again in Baltimore, going back to our board meeting in Baltimore, what we heard from 3 different employers: public safety is a non-negotiable. If my people are not safe, it's a non-negotiable.
Right.
I will have to decide whether I stay or I do not stay.
Well, and I give Mayor Brandon Scott a lot of credit because we put some branches in parts of the city in Baltimore that would not normally, including the Cherry Hill neighborhood. And at one point there were shootings, and I called him. I said, "Listen, I want to be there." He can't. He actually, before West was even governor, they sort of celebrated this thing and said, "I am not going to put my people at risk. So if I can't assure them that they can show up to work and that they're not, then I'm gonna shut down the." And he got all over it. He really did. And so I give him credit for it. But it is, look, at the end of the day, you guys, like, if the nightmare is that you have done something to put one of your employees at risk. Yeah, I worry about that before anything else.
But the CEO of the biggest company and the mother of students that's sending their kids to public school, they have the exact same goal in mind.
Yeah.
I want to love my kids. I want them to go learn in a great school and be able to walk home, play a sport in the playground, and then come home safe and sound, right? And I want to be able to take the metro to a place to go work and come back safe and sound. It's not a political issue. It gets so much noise again, but the signal to me has always been, no, what the politicians sometimes are listening to is not the vast middle.
Right.
It's, to an edge, very, very loud voice.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, this is the thing that's, man, you could cut this out if you want, but I mean, one of the amazing things I always hear the politicians, they do. So this is like, this guy in Detroit, he, essentially said, I'm not listening to the far left or the far right, and he leaves office after 12 years with an 84% approval rating. So, like, the politics can't be that bad, right? If you
Mayor Bowser,
yes,
Mayor Bowser is in running for re-election, and after many of us said, "You're a great mayor in a very difficult situation," and basically, she's been able to get the votes, but be able to be a friend to business because she understands that the businesses leave, there's no tax revenues in order to fund many of these programs, and to do that in balance.
Yeah.
And we're going to need more of that, not less of that, as we move into the next decade.
Yeah. Shall we close where we started, and I start with you, Russ, on bold bets, if you had to place one bold bet on the future of this region, what is it and why is now so relevant?
I believe if there is one regional stake in the ground that the Greater Washington Partnership could help facilitate and have real buy-in the same way we had for the International Olympic Committee with every single stakeholder that mattered, the same buy-in we had for Jeff Bezos and HQ2. It would be to recognize that as a sum of the parts, that it's not just a nice to have, it's an imperative that the business leadership and the political leadership look at the underpinnings of the economic health and well-being of the region and have real stated specific initiatives on how to be more innovative, how to create more new business enterprises, to look at what is going to drive growth at the top line, which is only going to come from new business and new business. That can include relocations. But if you look at the real outlier for us, which is ironic, that with all of these great assets, we are at or near the bottom in new business formations and innovative new companies moving the needle in AI, cyber, humanoid robotics, physical AI, all the things that are driving innovation and growth. And I think that falls on all of us. Because without that, 10 years from now, we'll look back and we'll go, wow, that's pretty nice looking battleship. It's still up and running and you can't kill it no matter what happens. But it hasn't really broken out.
Yeah.
I'd like the federal government to be more cognizant of the role that they play in business innovation should be benefiting Washington, D.C. and our region more than it is, because there's a huge dislocation that's happening in California in the Valley. And they've eaten their own there.
Yeah.
And so as an example, Elon Musk, like him or not, he headquartered his companies in Austin, Texas. And they're about to go public in the world's largest IPO. And all of that wealth, all of those people are going to be aggregating around Texas. Yet all of the dollars that came to make those companies successful, we're here in Washington, D.C., and we don't have any of that business here. Yeah. And I can go down many, many lists and say, if we could be more coordinated, and if you want to do business with NASA, if you want to do business with DOD, if you want to do business, you've got to benefit the people here in our region. And we should work like crazy when a company is here, Anduril, and it's moving to Ohio. When a company is here, Palantir, and it announces in the middle of the night that it's going to move its headquarters to Miami, to say, no, you can't do that. And so, I would like us to have more integration, not less, which, as a capitalist, I've always thought that the government gets in the way. We got to make sure that we're connecting those dots and that Washington, D.C. is front and center, for the benefit of the community, and that the federal government recognizes that.
Peter, you want to bring?
So I would just, yes and yes. And I would add one thing. I think we are, as broader society, that we're on the cusp of a technological revolution that is going to change everything. And this region has to be at the forefront of it in terms of workforce. And we have to be the most technologically fluent region in terms of our workforce, in terms of how we approach things, in terms of how we solve problems. Because I think the companies and the regions that do that are going to be the ones that succeed. And this is going to be potentially a tsunami of change.
Yeah, we're going to change the name of the NBA to the NBAI. I know it's
going to change. Yeah. It's going to change how the players on the court or on the ice, right? And so if we and Washington, will be where a lot of the decisions about how this technology is used and deployed or restricted.
Look at Anthropic every day in the paper today. Look at every decision that's being made around data centers and the stress it's going to put on our infrastructure around water and energy, all of the technological constraints that'll be if you're going to be selling to the government. I mean, the list goes on and on, Peter. You're exactly right. That's all going to happen right here.
And you've got the infrastructure. I mean, Colab, in fact, which was Russ Ramsey inspired innovation, getting business leaders, education leaders at all levels, universities, community colleges, in the high schools, together around the table to talk about how we do this together. I think there are going to be regions that are able to do that and regions that won't. And I think if we do, we have the cards that we can play this hand incredibly well if we get the right people together about that.
So I have call for action. There's a couple of CEOs of big companies that have been incredibly supportive of us, and but there's a couple of companies that haven't joined up, but they're benefiting from the work that we're all doing. And as we enter our next 10 years, Russ, Peter, me, you, Kathy, we should be calling on those people to say, get on board, because we need a strengthened, more united front to make this more effective even for the next 10 years.
We have a lot planned as we mark our 10th year. I do want to say that the three of you are really putting GWP aside, the region's greatest ambassadors. You speak about regional coordination every single day in all that you do, even outside of the market. So I do thank you, and I appreciate the insight, and the partnership will continue to do you proud. And we have a lot to recognize and celebrate in the decade to come. So thank you.
And we're very proud of your leadership.
Yeah, we're very proud of
Way to go.
Ted and Russ, thank you. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
That was truly an inspiring look at the 10-year journey from an idea to actual impact. A huge thank you to Ted, Peter, and Russ for joining us today. This conversation highlights that progress doesn't just happen. It's the result of bold bets, long-term vision, and leaders who decide to build something together that creates a lasting legacy. It leaves us incredibly optimistic about the future of the Greater Washington region and inspired by what we can accomplish now and in the decade ahead. Thanks for tuning in to Strategic Compass. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue our conversations with the bold Greater Washington area leaders shaping the future both locally and nationally.
Subscribe to Strategic Compass today and follow us for more insights from the corridor's most influential leaders, helping you stay informed and inspired.